This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about Bitcoin Core doubling down, but first I want to answer an accusation that's been circulating. Did Bitcoin Mechanic and I and others open up Bitcoin to a new attack by pointing out that increasing opportune data limits could lead to lots of higher fidelity CSAM being relayed around the network and mined? Of course not. Relaying or mining illicit material on Bitcoin is a well-known attack vector that's been discussed as long as I've been in Bitcoin, and certainly much longer. Gavin Andreessen was the one who visited the CIA in 2011, so you can be sure that intel agencies have been thinking about ways to destroy Bitcoin since at least 2011, and that they've thought through the CSAM attack vector much more thoroughly than most people, and certainly more thoroughly than the current group of Bitcoin Core lead maintainers who seem incapable of any sort of deep adversarial thinking. If you're a software dev trying to ram through a large change to Bitcoin that opens up the CSAM attack vector to everyone's mempools, and Mechanic points it out or I point it out, that doesn't all of a sudden give you the right to call us pedophiles or spooks. I'm not the one, Mechanic's not the one, Luke's not the one trying to rip out a decade-old filter. That's actually you, Bitcoin Core. And by pointing it out, people like Mechanic and me and Luke are taking tremendous heat in our personal and professional lives. Of course, the spook argument works both ways as well. Who's the one more likely to be the spook? The person arguing to keep Bitcoin the same and not push through a controversial change like Mechanic, Luke, me, and really a cast of thousands? Or is it the person trying to ram through a controversial change in the face of almost 20% of the network, telling Core that they don't want it? Quote, CIA operative wants to keep mempool filters the same as they've been since Bitcoin was $300 per coin in order to try to destroy Bitcoin. The other side, I think, needs to learn to meme a little bit better. Now, are people like Mechanic and me being hysterical and predicting something that's not going to happen? No, of course not, since it's actually already happened to a fork of Bitcoin that pushed through the same kind of change that Bitcoin Core devs are now proposing. This is an article from February of 2019. Child abuse images hidden in cryptocurrency blockchain. How did this happen? In January 2019, the amount of data that could be added to the BSV blockchain. BSV is a failed fork of Bitcoin, but it shares a lot of similar code and it works roughly the same way, though with just much larger blocks and a lot of other garbage. But it's similar in this sense, which is why it's a very good testing ground for seeing what might happen to Bitcoin if the opportune filters are blown open. But as the article says here, in January 2019, the amount of data that could be added to the BSV blockchain was increased significantly. Before that, people could generally add only short chunks of text or web links to the blockchain, but now it's possible to add full images in an encoded format. And this was a change to overturn. This is exactly what Bitcoin Core devs want to do now. As Sina points out here, he accuses me saying, finally using CSAM in rhetoric is a very particular choice I would certainly avoid if I wanted to have a good faith argument. And I would say that this is an argument that the anti-spam side has been trying to avoid for 2 years. Now it's getting very desperate. It looks like Bitcoin Core is digging in their heels. We're only 3 or 4 weeks away from this filter being completely blown open. And so when we talked about spam for 2 years, to a large extent that fell on deaf ears. And I think what a lot of us were hoping is when we said spam, people would be smart enough to extrapolate it to all the use cases, and in particular the most horrific use cases, which is probably CSAM. So it'd be nice to say spam. That's what we were saying. People weren't paying attention, and now we pointed out a particular use case, and we're in the very uncomfortable position, at least I am and Mechanic is, about making videos about this stuff, which as family men is a very awful thing to have to do. Now, in terms of the inscriptions hack, putting JPEGs and other stuff on the blockchain, it's just a hack, but it's obviously just a clever way to force Bitcoin to do something that it's not meant to do. No one who supported the SegWit and Taproot upgrades wanted them to be used to make inscriptions. And now there's an easy patch that can stop them from being relayed around the network. But Bitcoin Core has been asleep at the wheel for this too, and they've refused to apply this filter and patch. Inscriptions is a hack that can be fixed, and I'll be advocating to have this fixed as soon as we can get over this horrible opportune thing. Changing opportune, though, is quite different from inscriptions. Changing opportune to allow more data is really rolling out the red carpet to people who want to easily put contiguous non-monetary data on Bitcoin and giving them a really big space to do it. In fact, that's the historical reason for OpReturn, to give people a tiny, tiny place for arbitrary data, maybe just a hash or two to put it on blockchain as sort of an anchor in the time chain. And this is why it was kept so small over the years, 40 bytes for Bitcoin knots. Bitcoin Core used to be 40 bytes and then raised it to 80 bytes, which is still, I would say, a reasonable amount, though I personally prefer 40, 42 bytes. Now, Bitcoin Core wants to blow open this filter and allow giant images to be relayed by nodes across the network by default. Now, how did they not see that the same thing could happen to Bitcoin that happened to BSV when this exact change was made? It's because they're a bunch of narrow technocrats who seem to be unable to see the forest for the trees. And so I'll put it in these terms. What are you going to tell your friends and family when Elizabeth Warren announces that the first full block of 10 100,000 byte OpReturns full of just CSAM has just been mined? And it wasn't just submitted directly to a miner, it was relayed across the network by nodes like yours and mine, though mine will not be relaying it because I'm running Bitcoin knots. I will have plausible deniability. What will Bitcoin lobbyists tell Congress at that point? Now again, F Elizabeth Warren and her goons and the state. They're hypocrites who fly in private jets and then want you to ride a bicycle to save the planet, and lots of fools fall for her rhetoric. But the Bitcoin community does need to be aware of how politics works. It's one thing to make a change to Bitcoin that makes it better money, and I'd be quite willing to take government heat for something like that. It's quite another thing to make a change to Bitcoin that does nothing to make Bitcoin better money, but rather that opens up Bitcoin to CSAM and other horrors, and then leads to a complete mess when AOC becomes president in 2028 and the Dems take back control of the government and Elizabeth Warren is our new regulator. You have to think forward and think how this backlash might happen if it happens. And again, it might never happen, but the smart thing to do is to prepare for these things and do a little adversarial thinking. That's why people like Mechanic have been arguing that we need to get ahead of this mess, use some simple adversarial thinking right now in 2028 and 2025, and not make unnecessary changes to Bitcoin for some narrow technocratic reasons that miss the forest for the trees. I think Parman had a great post here. He writes, Bitcoin Core will be used as a mule for free, unstoppable CP/CSAM by sickos or state actors in order to attack Bitcoin and prosecute those who knowingly allow it. This is the attack. Once OpReturn is removed, plain JPEG images, not part of multiple fragments inside scripts that need to be pieced together and decoded, but plain JPEG, GIFs, MP4s, will be sent through your Bitcoin hardcore node version 30 plus from one pedophile to others, possibly sold. Knots runners won't touch them ever. Your core node will happily pass it along, providing anonymity to the criminals or state attackers or Epstein's old clients. They will pay a well below market rate initially, eventually zero, and never even need to get the transaction mined. This is a key point. The original filter that Satoshi introduced, fees, will be effectively bypassed. So all those people out there saying transaction fees and activity on chain is going to fix this. No, it's not going to fix it. After some time, these low fee CP, CSAM transactions will be dropped by Bitcoin Core nodes. But if they don't, the sickos can do an RBF, replaced by fee, of the transaction, or if they have chained them, an RBF of a single low-fee unconfirmed parent to cancel and invalidate the transaction, so they don't have to actually pay for any of the downstream higher-fee large transactions. They will have successfully used your computer to transfer and potentially sell horrible images without paying. So forget filters don't work, they'll get on chain anyway. Thanks to you being complicit, and thanks to all the core devs who allowed this in, and those gaslighting us, saying that this is wrong. Shiny points out here, just in case you've never read the reasoning for removing OpReturn limits altogether, here's Antoine trying to explain again. Citria, which is a startup, needed 160 bytes of OpReturn once in a while. Core changed it to 100,000 bytes, in other words, removed it altogether, removed the OpReturn filter, apparently because they decided it just doesn't do anything. Makes complete sense. And here's Antoine's argument. He's one of the Bitcoin Core devs. The point of making OpReturn bigger was that some applications want to have a proof of publication for a modicum amount of data, like Lightning does, in case a specific transaction in an off-chain protocol is broadcast. Here's the thing. Sorry, you don't get to try to change Bitcoin just because some crypto startup needs something on the blockchain that's not currently being provided. And now it appears that Bitcoin Core lead maintainers are doubling down on their poor choices while refusing to engage in good faith discussion about the real risks of blowing open OpReturn. Here's Gloria, who's one of the five lead maintainers for Bitcoin Core and apparently one of the main spokespeople for them, just like Antoine seems to be. Here's Gloria posting yesterday. Some people seem to have missed the summary accompanying the op return defaults increase, so I'll post it here again. It has absolutely nothing to do with quote-unquote wanting arbitrary data stuffed in the chain. And I thought Toronto Hodl had a great response to her here. Core devs, this code change should fix some stuff. Plebs, yeah, but it introduces this massive existential bug. Core devs, yeah, but that's not our intent. This really does feel like that. So here's the real problem. You don't get to wear this crown of neutrality if you also post stuff like this when you're a lead maintainer. And I'm going to show you what else Gloria has posted. Here's Gloria apparently taking a sly dig at Luke Dasher for his Catholicism while simultaneously mocking Christians, Jews, and Muslims who take the books of Moses quite seriously. And she's also mocking people who are against inscriptions and scammy tokens. Here's Gloria. This is not something that you should post if you're a lead maintainer. I think this is very unprofessional. She's making up a pretend Bible verse from the book of Nakamoto, blah, blah, blah. And this is what she writes. And Satoshi spake, not in whispers, but in hex, saying, Thou shalt not embed thine data in every field, for the blockchain is not thy diary. Yet I bestow upon the op return a sanctuary for up to 40 bytes, no more, lest ye walk the path of vanity. Anyway, you get the idea of this. This is not a serious or respectful person. And people like this should never, ever be allowed to get anywhere close to right access to the most important software project in the history of humanity. Now, while I'm upset about this, there's an important reminder here. When interacting with Gloria or Antoine or any other Bitcoin Core dev or supporter, online or in person, do be respectful and kind. And I've tried not to say anything personal about Gloria here. I've stuck to her public posts and the sort of attitude that she has in them. But just be respectful and kind. Be a class act. Remember that there's a real person behind that Twitter account. And that by becoming a Bitcoin Core dev as well, you're opening yourself up to public attacks or worse. So I'm trying to thread this needle here of attacking what these people are doing without attacking them personally. And believe me, if I wanted to attack them personally, you've seen what I've done to some of the shitcoiners over the years. That's not what I want to do, because these are people who've dedicated their lives to doing this to Bitcoin. Some of them are probably spooks. Some of them are just idiots. And I'm not naming any particular ones. But again, you're opening yourself up to public attacks and stuff. So let's be respectful online, and let's not call them idiots like I just did. Be a class act. Be a good advocate for the anti-spam team. Don't be like the other side, which is often so vulgar and full of hate and contempt, not just for anti-spam people, but for everyday Bitcoiners. Like, for example, laughing about a DDoS attack on regular Bitcoiners in our homes, like these bad actors did. And I'll put a link to this video in the description notes below. Finally, this would be my message to, I want to amplify what Giacomo Zucco said here. This would be my message as well to Bitcoin Core devs. When an honest man or woman discovers he is mistaken, he will either cease to be mistaken or cease to be honest. So especially if you're young and you have your whole career and life ahead of you, I would encourage you to do the right thing here. At least engage in these arguments and don't just write off the other side as a bunch of crazies. Don't go silent. Don't be stubborn. Don't succumb to the institutional imperative and push this thing through, because it's very bad for Bitcoin. And it's also, I think, going to be very bad for anyone who supports this change to Bitcoin. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.